What's up, everybody? I'm James. Welcome to Mechanical Mayhem, and welcome to another stroll down memory lane. Here we're looking at MW2, the Titanium Trilogy CD case, as well as the manual. I wish I had the box. That's not just for this, for a lot of the old games that I have. Something about the old game boxes. They just don't do it anymore, well, like at all, period. But it was really cool. I don't know how to describe it without sounding cheesy and super old, but it was like magic in a certain respect. Just really cool to have that stuff. But anyways, tangent. This is a stroll down memory lane for MechWarrior 2 as a whole. The trilogy of MechWarrior 2. We're just looking specifically at the Titanium Trilogy stuff. Now, a little bit of context here. This is what I would come to own, but it's not the first time I experienced MechWarrior 2. In fact, I would experience MechWarrior 2 at a friend's house first and foremost, with the DOS version, then the Windows version, and then Ghostbusters Legacy, and then Mercenaries, and eventually we would get a home PC that had a CD-ROM. I see, this was the 90s, so PCs weren't like they are now. Some houses didn't even have one, right? We did, and it was a really super basic Windows 3.1 machine. Kind of nuts. No CD-ROM, nothing like that. No real specs to do anything outside of like Word documents. And with that, we also had a typewriter. It had a printer, a real style printer, REEL, where you had to peel off the sides of the paper when you were done and tear it off when it was printed. But really, it was just easier to use a typewriter, and I wrote most of my school papers growing up as a kid, where the end result was done on a typewriter. Either when I was younger, I would write it up, and then my mom would correct spelling and type it herself. And then when I got adept enough, I would, once we corrected spelling and everything else, type it up by with a typewriter by myself. So kind of crazy times. In any case, by the time we got a PC at home that had a CD-ROM that could actually run some stuff, the Titanium Trilogy was out, so that's what I got. So with that said and out of the way, MechWarrior 2 is kind of nuts. If you look it up, I believe easily over 24, so over 24, maybe even approaching 30 or a little bit above 30 different releases and re-releases of MechWarrior 2 in its heyday over time, including 2 console ports. Which makes it a logistical nightmare for figuring out how can we get this thing onto modern PCs, like through Steam or something, because the rights, I don't know how you even figure it out to do that, or a remake or anything. So kind of nuts. Now, if you're looking at the box art pictures here on the Titanium Trilogy and thinking that looks familiar, you'd be right. PGI is definitely smart, because for MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries, for MechWarrior 5 Clans, and for the Ghost Bear DLC for MechWarrior 5 Clans, they pulled from MechWarrior 2's box art. So MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries has that kind of red look to it, in like some of their promo images for it, very much inspired by this box art. MechWarrior 5 Clans, we got the Timberwolf with fire in the background and everything, very much inspired by this. And the Ghost Bear DLC has the Kodiak with the blue background and the blue writing, very much inspired by the Ghost Bear DLC. So pretty cool. It's also kind of funny, albeit we did a bit backwards with MechWarrior 5. MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries is a standalone game. MechWarrior 5 Clans, standalone game. Ghost Bear DLC needs MechWarrior 5 Clans. Well, MechWarrior 2 came out, the base game where you play as a clanner, Wolf or Jade Falcon. Ghost Bear's Legacy was an expansion to it, so it required that. And then the third release, Mercenaries, was a standalone game. Really kind of neat how that plays out, when you think about it. It was also kind of nuts. I don't know about nuts, but interesting to think about. I didn't think about it as a kid. I didn't really know about the whole unseen mech thing as a kid. But what's interesting here is that MechWarrior 2 and Ghost Bear's Legacy, of course, have clan mechs in them. But the clan mechs include some unseen variants, right? Like the Rifleman 2C, the Marauder 2C, stuff like that. We have those in MechWarrior 2 and Ghost Bear's Legacy. MechWarrior 2 mercenaries would not have a rifleman or marauder or warhammer or anything like that in the game. And I suspect it's because the whole unseen mech situation reached a real headway when this was being developed. So that's kind of neat. And I'm wondering if that's part of why it's completely standalone. Maybe. Anyways, with all of that said, this is a fantastic series. If you're wondering about this manual, by the way, and why it's so beat up like this, let's go on some more tangents since that's what I do here. Also, look at that sweet, sweet graphical capability. I mean, back in the 90s, early and mid 90s, if you will, mid to somewhat late 90s, I suppose, whatever, this was pretty impressive. Anyways, one of the apartments I lived in, quite a few years ago now, had an apartment fire. My unit wasn't affected, but it was a 2-story apartment building, and that's how the whole complex was, a series of 2-story buildings with 8 units in them. So half of the units in the building that my unit was in caught fire and were basically gutted completely by fire. Luckily, nobody was hurt, but of course, the fire department's got to roll in there and go to town. And because it was right up against my unit, they had to bust through the door into my unit, tear down a bunch of ceiling, and spray a bunch of water at the everywhere to make sure there was no embers to catch and whatnot. And I had a bookshelf in that very room that this and some other stuff was on, and this, of course, took a hit. That's why it looks this way. It got pretty heavily soaked. But I let it dry carefully, and as you can see, everything is capable of being read. So I'm really glad about that. Obviously super glad nobody was hurt, but I am glad to be able to still have this and not have to just get rid of it. So that's why it looks like this. FYI. This is 3 mini manuals basically in one. Or not 3 mini manuals, this is 3 manuals in one. All 3 games have their manuals in here, and they're called out specifically when you go through it. Now what's really cool, if I can find it, is that we have controls, including a Thrustmaster controller. I don't know who used this to play, and rudder pedals for torso twisting if you have it, for that full immersion feel. Never did it myself. I only had the Sidewinder, but still, kind of cool. So MechWarrior 2 really set the stage for the MechWarrior series. MechWarrior 1 obviously came out first, did well enough to kind of inspire a sequel. I suppose. I don't really know how well it did. I played it as a kid. It was confusing because it was a good old heyday DOS game. But in any case, MechWarrior 2 would set the standard and the mold that the rest of the series would follow. How the missions played out. The mech lab, instant action, training, and soundscape. Not just for the sound effects of the mechs, obviously they would improve it over time, but also the soundtracks. In fact, I would say MechWarrior 5 Clan soundtrack, you can, when you listen to it, you can almost hear not MechWarrior 2's soundtrack in it, but very much taking cues from how MechWarrior 2 soundtrack kind of set the bar. What's really interesting is MechWarrior 2 starts off making you a clanner for the first game and then the expansion for it. So MechWarrior 2 Mercenaries actually is a prequel, technically, because it goes from pre-clan invasion all the way to the Battle of Luthien. MechWarrior 2 takes place in 3057. MechWarrior 2 Ghost Bear's Legacy takes place in 3058. It's kind of crazy that we get to be the clans in MechWarrior 2, and it's post-clan invasion, kind of the big thing that brings them in, right, to the setting. So I thought that was kind of neat. This would be a fantastic remake if PGI or whoever else was able to actually cut through all that red tape and get the rights to do so, because you really just need to, I say just, I'm sure it's still a big deal, but you have all the missions and stuff here. You just gotta bring it into the modern game engine and whatnot, and I think it'd be pretty awesome if they could do that. But I don't think that'll ever happen. Now, The Titanium Trilogy, for me, has performed flawlessly in the entire time I've used it as a kid growing up. And I played this game a lot. I played the MechWarrior series from MechWarrior 2 all the way up to MechWarrior 5 a lot. When the PCs could run them easily enough. I wish I could get the older MechWarrior games to run on a modern PC. I just can't figure out how to get it to work right. My point in that, though, is that this has been touted as having some bugs. I don't remember ever actually experiencing those bugs, and I played it a lot. It could just be I didn't pay no mind to it. I don't know. I was a kid back then, right? But I had plenty of awesome fun in the Titanium Trilogy, so I'm really glad that I was able to, get it and play it and just still have it. So yeah, that's a little bit of a stroll down memory lane. If it works, you will. When I was talking about the apartment fire, you'll see some pictures that I have. I have like 3 pictures, not very good, but just to get a sense of scope of the damage. And my unit again was not the one on fire, thankfully. So this manual and some other kind of BattleTech stuff actually was caught in the blast, you could say, of the water. But all of it I still have, so I'm glad about that. Have you experienced MechWarrior 2 at all? Are you old enough to remember playing it on DOS and on PC or whatever else? Or have you been able to experience it on a modern machine? It's actually a fantastic uh, title in the series. It is a reason it's deserving of being called the gold standard by so many people because they did a fantastic job of this, especially when you realize what came before in the form of MechWarrior 1. Anyways, share your thoughts on MechWarrior 2, Titanium Trilogy, or otherwise. Thanks so much for tuning in and stopping by and joining me on this ramble, tangent-filled trip down memory lane. Alpha strike that subscribe button to be part of future conversations more easily, and until next time, take care.